And start the recording. So hello everyone, welcome to our Food Justice Learning Series. Thank you so much for joining us here on Inauguration Day, a celebratory moment for our country here in the US. And just excited that you all are joining us to be talking about mitigating climate change through doing food recovery. Welcome to the folks that may have connected through FRN, saw this online, or through our friends at the FarmLink Project. We're excited to share more about our work and specifically the work that we do and Kim and Natasha both do in their roles to mitigate climate change. Before we dive in, I wanted to share just a couple of the housekeeping items we have up on the screen. First, this session is being recorded and it includes the chat, but we cannot see or hear you. And we'll be making sure to send out the recording to you later this week. Also, a lot of folks have introduced them in the chat, but if you haven't already, let us know where you're tuning in from and your relationship to FRN. And then finally, at the end, Julia, my colleague, will be moderating a question and answer in a discussion forum. So if you have any questions throughout the length of the presentation, there's a Q&A function that you can use to submit your questions, and we'll make sure to get as many as we can at the end. So to kick it off, I wanted to share a little bit, just introduce myself and share a little bit about the Food Justice Learning Series. And then I'll dive into a little bit what we're looking to talk about today with our guest speakers here, Kim and Natasha. So my name is Cassie, and I work at FRN National Office as the Manager of Stakeholder Engagement. And so in my role, I get to work with great folks like Kim and Natasha that do work within this field outside of FRN and seeing ways that we can partner and work together. And then with my, joined by myself is Julia, and she works at the FRN National Office as well. Like I mentioned, she'll be moderating the Q&A, but Julia is specifically in charge of our chapters work. And so we had someone in the chat earlier saying they wanted to start a chapter. So Julia's the person definitely to get in touch with that. So a little bit about the Food Justice Learning Series. This is a series that FRN has put on, like so many other organizations putting on a webinar series this year, finding ways that we can connect virtually with our network. It's primarily focused on our students that work within the FRN chapter network, but it's of course welcome to anyone and everyone. So we're really excited to have some guest folks with us here today. But it's really a response to wanting to engage with our students in new ways and connecting across the nation and talking about how FRN plays a role in looking at food recovery as a way to mitigate climate change, like we'll be talking about today, but also looking into issues of and topics of sustainability, racial equity, social justice, and hunger within the United States. So we've hosted, this is our fourth webinar of this series. There was a couple more that we had last fall. So you can check out that on our website if you wanted to see the recordings there. And then we have 3 more that we have planned throughout the spring, more focusing on kind of looking at a career and looking ahead, again, focusing in on our students and knowing that this is kind of the time to be looking at jobs if you're graduating and how you might be able to advance racial equity and sustainability within your career. But for today specifically, like I said, we'll be talking about addressing climate change through food recovery. And knowing that you all, if you are participating in FRN chapter or in your own food rescue initiatives, you are mitigating climate change in your own way, but through doing food recovery. And this knowing that this is a really important topic that we need to address and that we need to work towards in mitigating it. And so I'm really excited to be joined by both Kim and Natasha that'll share a little bit about what they do to address these issues. So first I wanted to introduce Kim and share a little bit about her work and what she does. So Kim works at the EPA Region 4 based in Atlanta, and she is a physical scientist in the Lands, Chemical, and Redevelopment Division specifically. Her work and priorities are in this area of sustainable materials management at the EPA. So since 2011, Kim has focused on sustainable management of food issues as a champion for the EPA's Food Recovery Challenge, which FRN is familiar with and Kim will be sharing a bit more about today. And working with the hospitality industry to reduce food waste and with state recycling organizations as well. In addition to local governments, she works closely with Natasha in Atlanta, other nonprofits, and just academia in general. So really excited to have Kim join us here today. And then briefly, I wanted to also introduce Natasha. Natasha serves as the Senior Recycling Program Coordinator for the City of Atlanta in the Mayor's Office of Resilience. And she focuses on creating programs that increase wasted food diversion from the landfill as a part of the city's climate action and food access plans. So Natasha will be sharing a lot about those programs and initiatives today that she does within Atlanta. And she focuses on these programs to recover surplus food to feed food insecure residents throughout the city, and then also collaborating with external partners to create composting systems that benefit local gardens and farms. So in her role at the city, she's also created, administers, and citywide sustainability ambassador leadership program that graduates just under 100 participants per year. So really excited to welcome both Kim and Natasha. Thank you all for the folks that have joined us. I'm now going to pass it on to Kim, who will be sharing a little bit about her national perspective of mitigating climate change through food recovery at the EPA.
Okay, so am I sharing my, there we go. I'm not. Okay, don't have to. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. Like Cassie said, I'm Kim Charick, and I work for EPA out of Region 4. We are in Atlanta, and we are the largest of 10 regions from across the whole country. And so Region 4 includes Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi, North and South Carolina, and Tennessee. So we have quite a bit of responsibility. Oh, next slide, please. Okay, so I am supposed to read this disclaimer, and I hate disclaimers, it's so legalese, but I'll tell you really what it says is that we're not endorsing, recommending, or favoring anybody, and that, let me read this one. This in no way implies that there are not additional sources of information, entities, products, processes, or services available to you. And I think that's all I need to read. If you all want to take a picture of that with your iPhone and read it later, wonderful. So EPA was established in 1970, and that was by Congress and President Nixon. Our mission was and still is to protect human health and the environment, including excess food waste prevention and recovery. That's right, in 2020, we celebrated EPA's 50th anniversary. So I'm actually a geologist, but my business card says I'm a physical scientist, and that's how I'm categorized. So I have to say that. But a lot of what I do is strengthening the recycling infrastructure across the Southeast. I partner with anybody who will partner with me, agencies, businesses, governments, schools, just, you know, I'm always looking for somebody who wants to move the needle and make a change. When we have funding at EPA, and a lot of the times I get really lucky with my program, and we do have funding. I get to help grant awards, and it's really just a little bit of money. We call it seed money. And we add things like, say there's no glass recycling, because that's sort of a big deal now, where I want to say the MRFs, we're not taking glass anymore. So that's the material recyclers. So when you put stuff in the recycling bin, they're just like, oh no, we don't want it. So there's a city who gave us an application. And so we were able to fund a glass recycling portion for them. So now they're able to reuse the glass in all kinds of different cool projects. Sometimes we give grant money to try to solve a problem, like collecting food scraps from restaurants that instead of being thrown away are collected and turned into compost and or used at an urban farm. And you all might realize that when you use these food scraps to produce a soil amendment, you are bringing soil back to life. You are also providing nutritious fruits and vegetables, because sometimes the soils no longer are teeming with microbes. So food scraps really help that. We'll think I need to go to the next slide. And this is, here we go. So today's presentation, I'm going to focus, as Cassie said, on how EPA is addressing climate change through food recovery. So I wanted to start you out with a short video clip that to remind everybody why climate change is something important to talk about.
Can you hear that sound okay? No?
I don't hear anything yet.
Okay, let's see. Oops. Still not now?
Now we can see him though.
Okay, I'm not sure how to fix that. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Let's
Sure.
try. That work?
It's getting closer.
Closer?
Just the volume needs to be up a little bit, but he's definitely making sounds.
Okay, let's see. Thank you everyone for your patience. Let's try this way. Still no?
It's very, very low.
Someone chatted.
Someone mentioned that there's closed captioning underneath it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I might just do that, and I think that might be the best option here for closed captioning. Sorry, folks, but we can go ahead and just continue with closed captioning. I'll restart it.
Okay. So if you take me to the next slide.
Mhm.
So I'm sorry we didn't really get the volume from that, but you could still, from seeing the pictures, you could see that that was very powerful. And I'd like to share with you some more powerful information. Today, 7.3 billion people consume 1.6 times what the Earth's natural resources can supply. So by the year 2050, the world's population is supposed to reach 9 billion, and the demand for food will double. We can't double the amount of food, and fortunately, we don't have to. We have to double the amount of food available. We have enough food to feed everyone, but it doesn't reach everyone who needs it. So next slide. Roughly a third of the world's food is never eaten, which means land and resources used and greenhouse gases emitted in producing it were just not necessary. Interventions can reduce loss and waste as food moves from farm to fork, thereby reducing the overall demand. Producing uneaten food squanders a whole host of resources: seeds, water, energy, land, fertilizer, hours of labor, financial capital, and generates greenhouse gases at every stage, including methane when organic matter ends up in our landfills. So next slide. In 2018 alone, EPA estimates that 63 million tons of wasted food were generated in the commercial, institutional, and residential sectors. We estimate that over 38 million tons of food were sent to landfills and combustion facilities. More food reaches landfills and combustion facilities than any other single material in our everyday trash. So we're on a mission to change this. If 50% to 75% of food waste is reduced by 2050, avoided emissions could equal 18.8 gigatons of carbon dioxide. Reducing waste also avoids the deforestation for additional farmland, preventing 76 gigatons of additional emissions. So on September 16th, 2015, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, we were in alignment with those targets. The US Department of Agriculture and EPA announced the first ever goal to reduce food loss and waste by half by the year 2030. By taking this action, the US can help feed hungry people, save money for families and businesses, and protect the environment. So EPA is proud to share what we're doing to support food waste reduction. Reducing food waste has been an administrative priority for the agency, and it will continue to be. We've joined with the US Department of Agriculture and the Food and Drug Administration as our federal partners on this topic, because together we're going to be able to address many issues facing the food system today and reach more people and meet the national goal of 50 by 30. That's the new lingo. So next slide. In October 2018, EPA, USDA, and FDA signed an interagency formal agreement and introduced the Winning on Reducing Food Waste initiative. So this initiative aligns efforts across the federal government to educate people, engage stakeholders, and develop and evaluate solutions. So if you click a couple times, there's going to be some fancy things that happen with this slide, and then we go to the next one. There we go. So in 2018, the EPA, USDA, and FDA announced the release of a federal interagency strategy, and these are the 6 priorities to address food waste. These agencies held a big event at EPA and headquarters to hear from, the people who are on the ground really doing doing the work, states, local governments, community leaders, and other stakeholders. And how can we work together to really make headway? So the next slide. So along with our partners, we know that we can't make changes acting by ourselves. We need our partners. So some of our partners here, big companies that you will recognize. We have formal agreements in place with ReFed and the Food Waste Reduction Alliance. We acknowledge industry leaders who have made public commitments to mirror our national goals and reduce their food waste 50 by 30, the US Food Loss and Waste Champions. In 2016, the USDA and EPA announced the formation of this champions group and presented the first set of 2030 champions. Currently, we have 31 champions. Most recently, Amazon has joined us. Next slide. EPA also works with over 1,000 businesses and organizations and schools and recognizes partners for outstanding achievement as part of the Food Recovery Challenge. Cassie mentioned this a little bit earlier, and you'll see some brands that you definitely recognize there. So what the Food Recovery Challenge is, it's a voluntary incentive program where these organizations and businesses, they set goals. And then they put those goals in place to reduce food waste in their operations and report results. And they compete for annual recognition from EPA. So they can join as participants or endorsers, and they're encouraged to follow the food recovery hierarchy to prevent and divert wasted food. And some of the actions are source reduction, so preventing food waste in the first place, donating it to people who need the food. Next down the hierarchy is feeding animals, industrial uses like anaerobic digestion and composting. So next slide. So here's some of our achievements, and we're usually about every 2 years we have the numbers together. So that's why we're talking 2018, slightly behind because of COVID, but we prevented over 815,000 tons of excess food from landfills, 18,000 tons of excess food through source reduction, preventing the food waste, and then with a benefit similar to removing 139,000 cars from the road. So next slide, I think, is just showing where people can sign up and find out more about the Food Recovery Challenge. I used to tell people that this was my son in the picture here because my son looks similar, but that's not really my son. Next slide. So here's our hierarchy. And honestly, EPA has spent a whole lot of time towards the bottom in composting and anaerobic digestion. And more recently, Natasha and I are going to be doing a project in Atlanta with the Food Recovery Network. And it is at the top. It is source reduction. We are trying to bring surplus food that is on the farms that does not have a location yet where it's going to go, to bring it into neighborhoods where people don't normally have access to local good fruit and vegetables. So real excited about that. Next slide. So we have a ton of tools on our website. And one of the tools that we have that I'm excited about, that I love, is it's Food Too Good to Waste is what it's called. And this is great because all of you in your homes or wherever you live and wherever you eat, you can prevent food waste in your own home. And things like, I didn't know that there were certain vegetables and fruits that don't have to go in the fridge. So if you look here on this slide, you'll see, like for me, mangoes and papayas, I thought that went in the fridge. And so I learned a lot about that. But they have all kinds of tools in here. Like you take a clear bin and you put eat me first on it. Maybe you write it on a piece of paper. So anything that might get lost in the back of the fridge that might go bad first, you have an opportunity to grab that and eat that first. And I did this test with myself when I first found out about this tool. And I took a bucket and I thought, well, let me see how much food waste I have in my fridge. And after I filled up the first bucket and went to reach for a second one, I realized, Houston, we have a problem here. So I started using some of the techniques in my own home. Next slide. So here is a greenhouse gas equivalency calculator. It's part of the WARM model is that EPA has out a waste reduction model. And what WARM does, WARM recognizes, you can go to the next slide, 60 different material types. I mean, they look at emissions from beef, they look at emissions from drywall, electronics. So a great deal of information. And sometimes you're trying to take this huge number and make it into something that people can relate to, like the 139,000 cars that you take off the road. WARM model helps you do that, makes your numbers relate to something people can relate to. So next slide. This is the excess food opportunities map. And this map has gone through several name changes. Basically, it plots out the generators of food, potential food, and then potential places where the food can go. It's an interactive map. It has correctional facilities, educational institutions, healthcare facilities, restaurants, food service, and we are always improving it and making it better as we get funding. Next slide. This is another tool, and quite honestly, I'm not super familiar with it yet. It shows how cities are doing to recover wasted food, and I think it has a lot of other applications as well, but we'll skip this and go to the food waste infographic. So food waste accounts for 25% of all fresh water use, enough energy to power the country for more than a week, and enough land to feed the world's hungry. So next slide. Another really cool tool. This came about by the University of Arkansas, the World Wildlife Foundation, USDA, and EPA threw in some contributions. And it basically takes people on a step-by-step audit of what the food waste is. So like at a school, what are kids not eating? Go to the next slide. I've got some sort of pictures of actual, so these are the different stations, and the buckets are where the food is put, and then it's weighed also. And so you can see what are kids not eating. Go to the next slide. I think I see mashed potatoes there. Yeah. Next slide. So these are all the different tools that are part of this auditing device. And you can see some of the actual food. Next slide. And so this is what's being wasted. And then this is my favorite one. This is food that has not even been opened up yet, that's donatable. And so this part is really exciting. When schools see this, they really want to be part of this program. Next slide. So here's some more resources. How to audit food loss if you're grocery stores, manufacturers, restaurants, universities, the same type thing where they have the setup and they show you just how to go through it step by step. Next slide. So a lot of us here, and especially when I used to go into restaurants to get people to sign up for the food recovery challenge, they're afraid to be sued. They don't want to donate food. Well, there is something called the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act. And so University of Arkansas put this together so that people could understand that law and realize that they're not going to be sued. So that way we're actually donating more food instead of wasting it. Okay, next slide. So something else that EPA did this year that they have never done before, we gave away over $3 million to support anaerobic digestion. We had 12 organizations that were selected, and 2 of them came from Region 4. This is another way to not contribute to food waste. This is another way that we are adding infrastructure, adding capacity. So if you go to the next slide, we'll tell you who our winners were here in Region 4. So Emory University and Florida Atlantic University. And then if you go to the next slide, you'll see the whole country, which universities were selected. And we're really hoping that this becomes a thing that we do again and again. The largest amount of money that any organization got was $300,000. And it seems like maybe a lot of money, but these types of operations are so capital expensive that that's just drop in the bucket to really be able to kick off what needs to be done. So really excited about that. Next slide. Terrific. Let's see, we're having a hard time seeing that next slide. Okay, really that main, what you want to, oops, can you go back one? Well, I guess it doesn't matter, we got it right there. In green at the you can get to most and everything that I've spoken about today. There'll be fact sheets, partnerships, tools, tips, individuals, what you can do, a lot of what I've already spoken about. But yeah, if you write that down, that top, you have any questions beyond this, feel free to give me a call. So we can go to the last slide. And thank you, everybody. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate all of the resources and just outlining all the statistics that you were sharing, especially the one that hit me was towards the beginning of reducing the food waste. I like the 50 by 30 or 30 by 50. Did I swap it?
No, it's 50% reduction by 2030. So that's our new sort of tagline.
I love it.
50 by 30.
I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I just wanted to pull through some connections even the FRN has had with some of these tools. Is Kim, you mentioned the 2018 Food Recovery Challenge. I know that year our FRN chapter at Cal State Northridge was a part of one of those winners. They had recovered 16,000 pounds that year of food from their dining halls, and their dining hall also participated in a composting initiative for both pre and post-consumer waste, which was really great. And then also at FRN, we actually use that excess food opportunities map a lot. We use
awesome.
Yeah, we use it specifically within looking at what priority areas we want to look at. So within our strategic plan, we overlay that map with the Feeding America food insecurity map to really see like where the largest gaps are with excess food waste, and then folks experiencing high hunger to see how we can kind of bridge those gaps together. So we at FRN definitely use tools and definitely encourage folks to check out more on the EPA website in ways that you personally can reduce food waste and within your communities. So thank you, Kim. I will now turn it over to Natasha, who, like I said, is the Senior Recycling Program Coordinator at the City of Atlanta. And Kim mentioned a couple ways that she works with Natasha. But yeah, I'll take it over for you, Natasha.
Hi. Okay, great. Hey, thanks for joining us tonight to talk about food waste, my life really. And as mentioned earlier, I work on food waste for the City of Atlanta, keeping it on landfill as part of our climate action plan, but namely as part of our food action plan. So next slide. So as we all know, because this is a space we work in, that 40%, some say 30%, some say 40%, but 40% of all edible food is wasted. And so that's food, as we all know, that's planted, watered, grown, and transported sometimes 1,500, 3,000 miles to reach customers just to go into the landfill. And so this is really important because 1 in 7 children in the US is hungry, 1 in 9 adults is hungry in the US. And this isn't just the homeless population, this is like your neighbor, this is senior citizens, these are people that are in between jobs. And we're wasting so much food, not only as a nation, but as a world, to where we could actually feed every hungry person 4 times over. And like Kim mentioned earlier, all the resources that go into growing food just to get it around and throw it away is about 21% of the water usage of this country every year, and then 10% of our energy usage. And I'm sure you've heard that fun fact that if it were the size of a country, it'd be third. The amount of greenhouse gases that are emitted from producing wasted food is third after the US and China. And also we notice here that it hits our pocketbooks too. The family of 4 is estimated to lose $1,500 a year on wasted food, totaling $218 billion a year. Next slide, please. So this is some of the environmental impacts. We don't really have to go over all of this again, but it's just showing that 26% of the nation's emissions is wasted food, and this other 73% or so is the built environment. And so this is made up of cows farting and the methane, because of the way they digest food anaerobically, that's creating a lot of methane. And so that's creating excess methane and greenhouse gases. The way their manure is left to pasture, the way it's being managed isn't quite good for the environment. Also plaguing the land is the use of synthetic and man-made heavily salt-based fertilizers in the last couple of years that is now stripping the planet of its topsoil. And this is topsoil that took thousands of years to create. And if we don't kind of address this pretty soon and we start to lose our topsoil, that's going pretty quickly, we're going to lose our food system. And so also it says transportation, but that's really the supply chain that's adding to the greenhouse gas emissions. So that's all the processing of the food, packaging it, and again, transporting it anywhere from 15 to 3,000 miles. So next slide. Next slide. Oh, sorry. And so then out of this 26% of greenhouse gas emissions that's being created out of actual food production, 6% of those emissions are coming from wasted food. I might have messed that up a bit, but the wasted food is just creating 6% of the greenhouse gas emissions out of the agriculture sector. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about how the City of Atlanta, our office works on food and what we do in our office around food. Next slide. Next slide, sorry. So the work we do in our office is really first and foremost based around or governed around the city's fresh food access plan. We have a whole urban ag department in our Office of Resilience. And under the last administration, we had a goal to get 75% of Atlanta's residents living within half a mile of fresh and affordable food outlets by 2020 last year. And so that's actually low access areas, like are better known as food deserts. We were to go in and create outlets that sell fresh fruit and vegetables beyond that token banana or apple or orange that many of these areas could only find in corner liquor stores. But we actually had to go in there and connect the areas to access to meat and eggs and dairy. And so that goal was met pretty early, or earlier than 2020. We actually met that goal in 2019. And so the current mayor, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, increased the goal to 85% by 2022. So now that's our directive. Next slide. And so just a little bit more background about what we were looking at food deserts is that in 2010, the USDA did a food access study around the nation that highlighted and brought to the forefront the problem of food deserts. And here in Atlanta, we were shown that 52% of our population, so half of our population, was not even living within half a mile of a fresh food access point. Represented here is LILA, or low income, low access. That's the other phrase that we use for people that are experiencing or not food insecurity, but actually are living in food deserts. And so the city knew it needed to do something about this. And so Atlanta has a pretty big culture of urban ag already present. And so the large solution at the time was to just grow more food and to kind of course, create more ways that we could create more markets in the area. So in 2015, the city hired its first ever urban ag director, and the first one for the nation too. And so with the work that him and his team were doing, they were able to get the next picture on the side here shows that we were able to get it up to the 70% with living within half a mile by that 2019. By just creating fresh markets, they were able to free up some zoning requirements that didn't allow people to grow in urban like in your backyard and in urban kind of settings. And so it was just about creating releasing some zoning problems and also creating some city investments that were actually going to get regular grocery stores. So we were able to get the food desert numbers down. Next slide. So meanwhile, at the same time, this very important work was being done to grow more local food. Next slide. In the summer of 2018, as one of the 100 resilient cities, our office was awarded a grant through the Rockefeller Foundation to collaborate with the Natural Resources Defense Council to map the city of Atlanta's wasted food by sector, with the goal of the work being to inform us on how increasing the recovery of edible food could further aid in our work of feeding our food insecure populations. So these were our results that we received in January 2019. And what you're looking at represents 125,000 tons of food ending up in the landfills. And because we all know, us on this call know that 40% of what's going into the landfill is actually edible, it makes you begin to look at the possibilities because, I mean, there's all these commercial sectors in here. And so you're like, well, can we start to save some food? Next slide. And so a little bit about the food insecurity in Atlanta. We have 17.8% of our population is food insecure. Compare that with 12.9% nationally. And that equates to a 14 million meals a year gap. And so with this study that we got back from NRDC, with just maximum kind of I guess maximum utilization of the infrastructure we already have for food recovery at 7%. That was the goal. Like we actually dip into that yearly meal gap by 65%. But if my math is also correct, if we actually just got that up to 10% somehow, that would actually obliterate that whole yearly meal gap. So next slide. And so was birthed the idea to start to create programs that increase food access for our neighbors by saving food from places like restaurants and grocery stores who have packaged foods and practices in storing food that make it readily accessible to collect and get over to nonprofit agencies and to hungry residents. Because even though you might have noticed in that slide before that the biggest culprit of wasted food is always going to be residents, in any city, it's universal, it's always in the house. We're never going to be trying to recover food from households because we can't regulate how you store foods and donate them. And so, but corporate or commercial sectors are always going to have more policies and protocols that allow for the food to actually be kept up nicely. And so, no, not yet. But it's okay. But it's okay, you can stay there. So when fruits and veggies and other perishables like cheese and milk are left vulnerable to end up in the trash because of sell-by dates, but yet they are still in good condition and can be eaten that week. So after that sell-by date, we began to create more systems that rescue fresh food the day of or before that sell-by date. And you'll see that the social and environmental impacts are quite beneficial. And so for this, what we did, the first thing I did was create like a restaurant challenge that went out citywide, but interestingly, I thought I was going to get like hundreds of restaurants, and I was only able to get 6 restaurants out of the airport, which is fine, because out of the 3 months that they participated, we actually saved 21,000 meals that were able to get into nonprofits that actually just went out to homes. And like I keep saying, this isn't, because when I do present this work a lot, they think it's this is a home, like we're feeding homeless people, but we're actually feeding residents in their homes. So it's just really powerful. So next slide, I think. Yeah. And so with COVID-19 derailing our 2020 planning, like we had some programming that was supposed to be slated to be working with Kroger, because they have a zero hunger, zero waste platform where we were going to be rescuing some of their food and getting it into some of our populations that we feed. So working with the Mayor's Office of Constituent Services, we feed people in senior centers. Working with the Mayor's Office of Human Services, we feed kids after school. And so this was going to be another way to actually funnel some of this food into some of our programs that then saves the city or saves the nation money. I think that's more of a federal program, how we get money to feed some of our food insecure residents. But because our municipal buildings are closed right now for COVID, we weren't able to deploy that program last year, but we're still rocking and rolling, because just last year, in the middle of the year, we got accepted into NRDC's 18-month long Food Matters Southeast Regional Initiative. And so even though I'd been working with them the couple of years before to map the food waste, I still had to apply for this. We're now working with Asheville, Nashville, Memphis, and Orlando, where we're elevating food waste, and it's still the main goal is to always feed people first. And so working with this in this 5-city cohort just allows us to kind of like elevate our work and be able to make broad changes for the region. That's still about food waste diversion. But what the missing piece, or the piece that's the pudding in the mix or whatever, is that to even be accepted into the program, our elected officials, so our mayor had to come out and say Atlanta is now working on food waste, whereas the 2 years before, that was just me kind of working alone and making little programs and saving food. But now that the mayor's come out and said it, it's just going to open more doors, because like so if you look at the sample strategies, we're going to start engaging health inspectors. I wasn't getting any doors open before then. Now they're talking, and because if I tell people all the time, I still go into grocery stores that don't realize they can donate food. They think it's against the law. And so that's going to be one of our big programs, is getting health inspectors to engage people while they're doing their inspections and saying, hey, you can donate this food, or you can anyone can compost, but just letting them know that they can donate food. We're also going to be working to expand community compost with some of this grant money. And I can't see the slide because of my little picture here. What does it say? Oh, more audits, I think, food waste audits, and some more business challenges. So, and we just convened a really great working group. That was a core requirement. If you see it over there, we've actually got to work with external partners that also work in this space. So we just had a meeting just last week where it was amazing. There were food recovery agencies in there, grocery stores, universities, the state, composters, waste haulers, business districts, sports stadiums, all connecting them to this Southeast Regional Initiative. So we will be that connection that's funneling what we're doing in the region into these people that are working on food waste here. So we all feel connected, and then the region just changes, right? So next slide. Okay, and so what about true food waste? Like when food can't be salvaged for human consumption, and there's nothing else, you can't eat it. So other than creating a story for farm animals, composting is the next best solution for reclaiming food and not letting all that good energy, water, labor, and love go to waste. Next slide. So when we start talking about composting, the first thought that comes to people's mind, because and especially, I mean, as soon as people know I'm a recycling coordinator, it's 2 things. They ask me about glass, and then they ask me when we're going to start composting. That's it. But people always, they have in their mind, they want to be able to put their food scraps in a cart and kind of roll it out to the curb to be collected like regular recycling. But I implore you to think differently, because most food waste is 70% water. And so even though, of course, regional composting is going to be a solution as well, but we should start to think of our waste in ways that we can start to handle it more locally. And food waste is definitely one of those things. We shouldn't be hauling outside of town 70 miles just to make compost and then haul it back inside. I mean, just whoa. We should be trying to figure out more ways to create decentralized systems. And so that's what we see on the left here. And where I think, yeah, Kim and I both belong to the Atlanta's community-based composting council. We're trying to deploy more of these 3-bin systems. I'm really looking into some vessel systems. I hope I can get some of those put around town one day and cover aerated static pods. It's all dreams. This is all dream stuff. But because it's breaking work, I mean, I turned a pile for about 1.5 years, and eventually you're just like, okay, I'm kind of done with this. But the real point is that it's really about trying to figure out ways to keep the food locally, and especially in our city where we have such a big urban ag component, we want to create more compost locally so that it can go back right into our gardens and our farms. And plus, if you're not, another thing is if you're not hauling that, getting a whole nother truck to come pick up your food scrap cart, that's a whole nother truck you're not creating greenhouse gas emissions with. So this is an example of, or the only example of community scrap drop-off we have at the city, just at the city of Atlanta. I'm sure there's others maybe within the council or within the network, but this is something I created about 1.5 years ago with 5 families, and it's still going, and they just go through a little training, and they learn how to put their food scraps in, and put some carbon on top, or some leaves on top of it. Next slide. And then that's just basically what was on that card. It just tells them what can go in and what can't go in. Next slide. And then what's created, because this is where it's at, it just goes right back into this food forest. This is a 7.1 acre food farm that we're raising, and that's where the compost site is. And then whatever we create there just goes right back into growing food right there. And it's in a neighborhood in downtown Atlanta. Next slide. And so if that wasn't enough to learn the great benefits of compost can also be used to sequester carbon. And when it comes to climate change, we are past the point of needing to cut back on carbon emissions that are accelerating climate change. We actually have to begin to find more ways to draw down carbon and put it back in the soil from where it came. And when soils are healthier, like through use of compost, everything benefits. So this even applies to the plant roots and the fungus relationship working better together. So when plants are doing their photosynthesis, there's a way that they're pulling in carbon, but to get the carbon deeper into the ground, there's a relationship that's happening with the fungus and the roots that's actually allowing. So there's symbiotic relationship. They're already working together because the fungus is able to go down there and get all the minerals and water that the roots of the plant can't get. But because that fungus also wants the carbon, so they're just exchanging the things that they want. So the fungus is getting all that minerals and water that the plant needs, but then for the plant to do the photosynthesis and pull that carbon down, it's going down to the fungus, and the fungus is pulling it down into the soil. So I mean, the more compost we can use, because it actually just makes soils more palatable even, and so more things live in there, more microorganisms, more fungus. In fact, France did a study that if every country just upped their compost production and usage by like 0.4%, we could actually store 75% of the world's annual greenhouse gas emissions just back into the soil. That's where it came from. So if you'll realize that I think compost is the answer to everything. Because next. Because eventually you have to start looking at your solid waste, right? And so if we start creating all these kind of systems, whether that's the anaerobic digesters, whether that was that big solutions for composting, or whether that was localized solutions for composting, you're gonna have to start to create things that go into these systems, right? If governments start to create like really big anaerobic digesters, we have to start looking at our feedstocks and what we're putting into these systems. So next slide. Yeah, and so the city of Atlanta, this is something that just happened last month. We've just created a single-use plastics ban for all of our municipal buildings. Just went into effect on, not 4th of July, what was it? New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve. And then hopefully we'll roll it out to the city like in 3 years, something like that. But this is where we're at. We've just been, so it's straws, styrofoam, and plastic bags. And so next slide. But what I'm fearful of, because what you're actually going to start to see is you're going to see what's on the right. And so that's that PLA and PHA that's made from sugars and starches of plants whose polymers and molecules have been altered to resemble plastics. But why this is a more problematic thing too, because this is larger solutions. This is like, now you need industrial composters, like industrial composting processes to break that down. And then because it's all plant-based, you're going to need vast amounts of farmland to grow the crops on the front end that's even going to even create this. But if we actually tried to stick more to like this on the left, like if we got more paper straws, but they got to be fortified. I know everyone hates paper straws. I get through it because I don't like waste, right? And if we just kind of tried to get more with like renewable kind of plant-based things instead of these fake plastics and polymers and stuff that have to go into big industrial solutions, we could begin to start decentralizing our waste and not hauling waste outside of town. And so these are the answers. Compost is the answer. So next slide. And it's just, if you can just play a little bit of the video, because this is just also showing you how food waste can turn into serviceware. It's a great video. Someone just sent it to me last week and you're getting it. So I don't know if it'll play, but all right.
Oops. Sorry about that.
So it's basically, it's basically, there's a pineapple company that I think they just make pineapple to go or serve pineapple, but they're able to sell the top of the pineapples that you don't need to this company, and they make plates out of them. Look at that. And so there you go. And so then they just put it right back into the ground, and there's the gimmick. They say you can grow things. They've got seeds in it and stuff like that, but we don't really need that, just in case. But we just want, it's just a great idea to take food waste, true food waste that you really actually is not edible, like the pineapple top, whatever that is, and make a whole new product out of it. It's kind of cool. So I'm going to be going down the rabbit hole to see, like, I guess how they price compare, because we all know compostable products are more expensive than styrofoam, but eventually this has all got to be scalable, because I mean, this is a great solution to waste. That's it. Yeah. Next slide. I think that's it. Yeah. How are we going to feed the world without starving the planet? So there we go.
Thank you, Natasha. I appreciate all of the detail and just examples within Atlanta that you have seen and what has worked for you and not has worked. I never had really thought about the bioplastics and how that affects localized composting and how you need in like the large scale. So that's really interesting. So I appreciate all of that information. So now I'm going to move us over to our question and answer portion. Again, thank you both Kim and Natasha for all of the discussion that we've had here thus far. So we want to provide an opportunity for our attendees to ask any questions. I know we had a couple come in throughout the presentations that we had. So I'll turn it over to you, Julia, to lead us through our Q&A.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, thank you, Kim and Natasha, for sharing all of these stats and the programs that you're both working on. They're really inspiring because sometimes hearing those stats again really makes you recognize the huge problem that we have. But it's always great to hear these new, exciting programs that are tackling these problems. So yeah, attendees, please feel free to chat your questions into our chat or into the question and answer box, and I'll read them out for our hosts. They can be specific, broad, whatever you feel. So one question we already had come through was from Carl earlier when Kim was speaking. And so he was referencing the ban in Vermont for all food waste going to landfills. And he's wondering if the new administration is going to follow in the footsteps of this state policy. And if you have anything to relate to that, or if you have any idea of how to connect with the right decision makers to make that more of a nationwide policy.
We are really bad at making nationwide policies. EPA it just does not ever honestly want to stick their neck out and do that. When you ban plastic, there's unintended consequences. So sometimes one of the states does it, and then the other states figure out exactly how that didn't quite work, and then they avoid making the same mistakes. So I think it's going to be piecemeal, one state at a time. Years ago, I worked with electronics, and we would never make an overall electronics decree. So I know that initially, California stuck their necks out, and everybody sort of hated their solution. So that didn't work out. That was a disaster. So yeah, no, EPA won't. They will never make but I don't have any information yet. I'm just telling you what won't happen.
Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
I actually have another question as attendees are typing in their questions. I'm wondering, this is for both of you. I'm wondering what advice you have for our student leaders who are already leaders in this movement, but how to, really propel this movement further. If you have any advice for them.
My thoughts are to join FRN and help us with our gleaning initiatives. FRN is going to be rolling out a gleaning training, and then you could be, right hands-on on farms. And even with COVID, being outside is not a bad thing, and you can social distance and get some sun and really make an impact and see it in person.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that project with EPA when that and FRN. Yes, so you will see all of us. And I tend to always tell people to like push their elected officials in some manner, whether it's plastic bans or just you want better waste protocols and procedures, and you want food out of landfill. Just kind of get one or two of you and start writing them or telling them, and they'll see that other states are working on this too. I think, because I think a lot has to happen at the top as well.
Definitely. I'm really glad you touched on that, Natasha, because FRN, this year we've rolled out our first ever advocacy program where we're really putting a lot of effort into getting our students to connect with their representatives on a state level, on a federal level, to really talk about food insecurity and to talk about sustainable ways to reduce food waste. So I agree, that's definitely a step forward, is connecting with those representatives.
Yeah, before I worked in government, that's what I was. I like to tell people, I happened to work in government, but before that I was always like down people's throats.
Amazing. We had another question come in asking about links or notifications for upcoming webinars, and absolutely, we will definitely be sharing all of that information with students, with our entire network, and with our external partners as well.
I also just had a quick question for both you, Natasha and Kim. Knowing that a lot of this work can be really daunting, looking at all the statistics of mitigating climate change and the number of folks that are experiencing hunger, I'm curious what motivates you in this work, and then also what challenges you as well.
I'll go first. What motivates me is being able to get some money in hand and being able to take a project that's like a pet project and actually be able to make an impact and help people. So I love what I get to do because I've been able to wrangle $550,000 out of DC this year for projects in the Southeast that I want. One in Atlanta, one in Tennessee. So I saw some people from Tennessee on this webinar, and Florida, and then the Emirate project. We were one of two regions who actually got 2 anaerobic digestion grants. So everybody else just got one project in their region. So I won't share my secrets, but.
And for me, this was actually just a midlife career change. I actually worked in garment manufacturing for many years before this, and I went and took a recycling class. And, I took a few classes, and somehow as soon as I found out about organic waste in the landfills being like a large producer of methane emissions, I was reborn. That it's really that simple. I went back to school, got my master's. I really did a whole, like I was trying to get a new career is what it was. And I tell people I work every day now on just things I used to write about. I just knew I wanted municipalities to work more on getting organic waste out of landfills because it's such a driver of climate change. And I always think it's got to be the easiest thing to recycle. I mean, before we're talking about recycling glass and aluminum and plastics, all things that need like some kind of technology to do. I mean, you're either going to feed people or put it outside or, put it back in the ground. So to me, it was always one of these simple things to kind of work on. And so I've just been pushing. And then I guess the challenge is that just waiting for it to kind of catch on. more and stuff like that, and realize that we do need some legislation about it, like other states and other parts of the world are doing. So I'm always quoting other states and countries and stuff like that. So yeah, but we're getting there. It feels like it.
Awesome. Well, I think we only have time for one more question. And so we got a question from Muriel, and she says, the 5-city collaboration with the NRDC was fabulous to hear about. How can one learn more about that? And here with the impressive group size, diversity, how do you manage all those perspectives? How do those stakeholders come up with these ideas?
Oh, Natasha, I think that's for you.
And it's totally my fault. I was thinking in my last thought and I missed the whole question. I've been applied the whole time. I just, sorry. Is it on here? Can I find it on the question?
Yeah, definitely. It's on the chat, but I can read it again. So Muriel is asking about the 5-city collaboration with the NRDC, and is wondering more about like how can someone from the outside learn more about that and hear what the group is coming up with for ideas.
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know that it's that public per se or anything like that, so I'm not sure how to funnel that information to you. I mean, I can always send the link that NRDC has posted about the collaboration, and then you can just always go to the NRDC's website and see if because they post like blogs or articles about the work from time to time. So, I mean, that's the only way I can think of. And they just launched another cohort. So there's a Southeast Regional, and then there's a Mid-Atlantic, which is like Pittsburgh and Baltimore and like 3 other cities. And they just released a Great Lakes one just like yesterday, something like that. So it's just these little cohorts. They're going to be around each other, kind of working on food waste. And we're going to have half the country in a minute. So
that sounds great.
And some cities are very public, like with LinkedIn. Like I know Orlando, Chris Castro,
yeah.
He like talks about everything they're doing. So if you link in with some of the some of the folks out on the social web, just to let people know what's going on.
You can follow me on LinkedIn too. I just did a post about this stuff too. I mean, I'm not sure because I just don't know that they're like, I don't know if there's posts about it exactly. You have to just link into people that are working on it. Follow us on LinkedIn, Kim too, and all these FRN people.
Definitely, yeah. And our follow-up email will definitely be able to send to all of our attendees more information about how to follow you all on social media, on LinkedIn, how to connect with you post-webinar. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Cassie.
Awesome. So in just the last couple minutes here, oops, I wanted to close this out. Sorry about that. Let me get it set back up. Oh, it doesn't want to do that for me. Just give me 1 second. Sorry about that. I wanted to close this out with our final slide. There we go. So wanted to share just a couple next steps that we have. I wanted to thank again both Kim and Natasha for sharing more about the work that you both do every day to work on food waste reduction tactics, and thank all of our audience for attending. We would love if you could join us at our next Food Justice Learning Series webinar, where we'll be talking about resources for finding a job after college, and that'll be next month in February. Also, we have a webinar survey that we would love if you had a moment to take it after this webinar. As soon as we close it out, it should open up on your internet so you can take that survey. We're really interested in your feedback and ways that we can continue to improve these webinars for folks that join us. And then definitely, if you're a FRN student, continue the conversation on our student portal and also connect with us on social media. And as Julia said, we'll be sharing a follow-up email to all of our attendees, including the webinar link to the upcoming webinar, this recording link, and ways to connect and continue the conversation. But appreciate all of your time. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you, Kim, Natasha, and Julia. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your night. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Nice to be here. Thanks for including us. We'll see you soon.
And if anybody wants to reach out with questions, feel free.
Yeah.
You've got my contact information. I'd love to hear what you all are doing, what you know.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye. Good night.
Take care.